Hi, how are you? Okay. Good evening, Board Chair Valancourt, members of the board, and Dr. Martirano. I am Anissa Brown-Dennis, Chief Operating Officer, and with me this evening is Renee Kamen, Manager of School Planning, and we are here to discuss the findings of the 2018 feasibility study. The feasibility study provides the school system with a review of the needs and strategies based on the most recent student enrollment projections. While the study shows several schools that are over target utilization, staff considered, according to policy, whether or not to recommend boundary adjustments. And after much consideration, staff decided not to recommend initiation of the boundary review process for school year 2019-2020 for the following reasons. Firstly, this year is an implementation year of several motions made by the board in November 2017, as well as the capital budget approval. We have accelerated a new high school and included additional seats at Hammond High School. We have initiated Jumpstart and new redistricting software. Staff also facilitated discussions with board members on reassessing the boundary process through a redistricting committee, and those recommendations from that committee were presented earlier this evening, and we'll continue to talk about that further. Secondly, we cannot stress enough that there is a seat for every child who attends a Howard County public school, and with the board's latest assignment of relocatables, all schools are below 110% capacity utilization when using that temporary capacity. These are temporary measures until we can construct a new high school at Mission Road, new capacity at high school, Hammond High School, and 2 new elementary schools for occupancy in school year 2021-22 and 23 and 24. And the County Council has funded high school number 13 at Mission Road, and with this commitment to fund, we are opening this high school in 2023. We are currently going through the planning and design process, working alongside our county partners to ensure the successful purchase, transfer, and construction of high school 13's timeframe, which was set earlier this year. Thirdly, staff is working to implement a new projection and redistricting software, which is scheduled to be up and running in the fall of 2018. This software was purchased during the 2017 redistricting process, and staff is working to implement this new technology. The Office of School Planning is currently in the process of completing testing of the redistricting components and creating the necessary demographic and feed reports that the board and residents have been accustomed to seeing. This software does not support several of the tables used in the WIFR to assess plans. Therefore, staff needs to create a similar process in the new software. Staff is in the beginning stages of monitoring and implementing Jumpstart, and since the end of the redistricting process, staff has closely monitored enrollment of Jumpstart. Approximately 256 students enrolled, with many siblings showing interest in the program. And as stated during the fall of 2017, staff is bringing a report and additional options of the program to the board this fall to decide next steps of that program. And before I turn it over to Renee to talk about, provide an overview of the feasibility study, I just would like to thank her and her staff, Tim Rogers and Jen Babanko, for their hard work in preparing this document. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Renee Kamen.
Good evening, everyone, again. For the record, my name is Renee Kamen. The purpose of the feasibility is simple. It's an annual planning document that begins the cycle of the capital budget process. It provides a new enrollment projection, proposes adjustments and additions to the capital improvement program and the long-range master plan, considers strategies to address enrollment growth or decline for the school system, and it follows the guidance of Policy 6010 school attendance areas. The capital planning process is an 18-month process that starts in January of the first year and ends with the school capacity chart or adequate public facilities ordinance. The enrollment projection presented in this document informs the capital planning for the school system, which includes adjustments to the delivery of capacity projects and such as additions or new schools. This chart before you this evening shows the boundary adjustment process in the context of the capital budget. The graphic shows that while school boundary adjustments may not take place annually, they are given consideration annually in our feasibility report. School planning is often questioned if we really are receiving 1,000 new students yearly? The answer to that question is yes. To demonstrate this fact, we've displayed the decreases and increases of the student enrollment over the last 3-year enrollment periods. The new students arrive at Hcpss each year and are mainly from new homes, resales, and kindergarten student enrolling in Hcpss for the first time. The exiting group of students, they're the ones in the orange, include those graduating or students who have moved from the school district. In 2017, we received a net gain of 1,137 new students to the Hcpss. Development of the annual enrollment projection occupies the planning office in the winter. The projection is the foundation for the planning of the feasibility study and the capital budget. We collect data from Hcpss as well from state and local agencies, and then use our GIS to aggregate the data by school to ensure we gain school-level insights about the trends. The data used is to project the September 30th enrollment. We use historic cohort survival, which looks at past student population patterns within the county to construct survival ratios and projecting a particular grade's migration through the school system. You can see it in the chart above you. The yellow shows a cohort of students moving through the system. In year 1, they are kindergartners. This particular cohort is exhibiting a growing trend, as you can see the students are joining the cohort each year. We divide the new enrollment by the previous year to get a ratio. We collect histories of these ratios, and then we apply these histories to our projection about what's going to happen next. In addition to the calculation and application of cohort survival ratios, the Hcpss uses many data points in order to project student population, including live birth data, first-time sales of newly constructed homes, resales of existing homes, apartment turnover, and enrollment at regional programs. Each data point is projected separately based on specific and appropriate methodologies for that category. It is important to know that new construction is only new construction for year 1 in the Hcpss projection. After that first year, new students generated by homes constructed in previous years are counted through cohort survival or resales. Hcpss 10-year K-12 projected enrollment for school year 2018-2019 through 2027-2028 continues to show enrollment growth at all levels. It is anticipated that for school year 2018, we'll receive a net increase of over 950 students. The increase comes from a variety of migration patterns and includes sales of existing homes and new construction. The enrollment projections need to be measured and tested each year. We are extremely accurate with our projections. However, we are continuously improving our projection methodologies. We share our results with the board each February with the accuracy report. As of September 30th, 2017, the countywide K-12 enrollment of Hcpss was 55,391. The projection developed in the spring of 2017 for the same time period was 55,251, a 140 student difference. Equitable evaluation of the impact of projected enrollment growth requires calculation of school capacities. Capacities are not necessarily fixed to the capacity design when a building is first open. Changes in space usage, program location, and building or program specifications can change capacity. Capacity methodologies have been reviewed at all 3 levels. The results from the capacity studies are integrated into any recalculation of capacities due to relocation of regional programs, additions, or renovations. For school year 2018-2019, the expansion of several special education programs and pre-kindergarten classes necessitated recalculation of capacity. They are listed above on the screen, and at table 2.7 can be found on page 14 of the feasibility study. Additionally, renovations and additions to Swansfield and Waverly added 173 and 172 seats, respectively. As Nessa stated earlier, we do have a seat for every child. The use of relocatable classrooms is a necessity as enrollment grows and we wait for funding to construct the brick and mortar or the classrooms. Therefore, we use temporary capacity in order to supplement seats inside the building. Since relocatables are considered temporary, school planning staff does not count it towards the building's actual capacity. Every year, school planning collaborates with school facilities to determine the condition of the current relocatables, school construction to determine the site accessibility and restraints, as well as school administration to determine which schools are most impacted by programs and enrollment growth. All of these factors contribute to any recommendation of relocatables, including student growth and the timing of capacity projects. When counting seats in relocatable classrooms, all schools have capacity utilization below the top threshold for target utilization of 110% for school year 2018-2019. The school system has a few ways in which to manage growth. They include relocatable classrooms, capacity evaluation, boundary line adjustments, new facilities, additions to existing schools, and moving Hcpss regional programs. In 2015 and 16, we worked with Howard County Recreation and Parks to relocate existing HCRP daytime programs in order to reclaim the interior space for our students. We look at our enrollment trends, our strategies to manage growth, consult with the policy, and look to the capital budget to determine what steps should be recommended, what next steps should be recommended, what strategies can get us there, and propose changes to our long-range capital plan in order to facilitate the population trends. This is how our long-range planning considerations are generated, but first, what needs do we see? The 2018 elementary school projection is slightly lower in the long term, but still shows a net gain of nearly 4,000 students by 2027. As a result of this enrollment growth, the capacity utilization of all elementary schools combined will begin to exceed 110% beyond 2026, if new elementary schools are not built. Projects approved as part of the FY 2019 CIP can accommodate most of this growth. The 2018 middle school enrollment growth trend is lower than 2016 and 2017 in the long term, but the projection still shows a net gain of nearly 1,200 students by 2027. As a result of this enrollment growth, the capacity utilization of all middle schools combined will exceed 110% beyond 2029. Most of the projected growth is in the east and north, and based on long-term projected growth trends, strategic capacity projects should be considered for the middle school level. The 2018 high school enrollment growth trend is also lower than 2016 and 2017, but still shows a net gain of nearly 2,000 students by 2027. As a result of this enrollment growth, the capacity utilization of all high schools combined will begin to exceed 110% beyond 2021. Similar to the middle school, most of the growth is in the eastern portions of the county, and based on the long-term growth trends, continued planning and finalization of the Mission Road site acquisition should continue. The documentation of enrollment trends are found actually on page 7 and 8 of the feasibility study. In order to facilitate the discussions this evening, we've provided a summary table that shows those schools that will be over target utilization within the next 5 school years. The chart on this and the next screen shows those schools that will exceed 110% capacity within the next 5 years of our capital planning. Sometimes, if target utilization is projected to be above 110%, we won't necessarily offer redistricting or a capital project immediately. We certainly consider these options, but may not recommend them to be initiated. There are certain factors outside of the school system's control, including land use decision and the economy, which is why staff sometimes is conservative with boundary or capital improvement recommendations. We also want to be realistic regarding capital funding constraints and fiscal responsibility. We have mitigated enrollment growth through the use of relocatables and are implementing the board's actions from the 27 redistricting process, and the board adopted capital budget to align with these goals. After much consideration, staff decided not to recommend initiation of the boundary review process in the summer of 2018 for school year 2019 and 2020. We have listed in front of you this evening the strategies for school year 2019 and 2020. This information is grouped by region and shows each school that exceeds 110% within the next 5 years. While we need to study, so what you're looking at essentially is for Columbia East, for example, elementary school level, Cradle Rock and Talbot Springs, both will exceed target utilization in 2018. That is anticipated to be 116.6 and 121.5%. Both of those schools currently have relocatables on site, And in addition to that, Talbot Springs is being recommended for a capital project in the timeframe of 2022. So for the strategy for 2019-2020 for these two particular schools is to keep the use of the portables and monitor the projections so that as Talbot Springs comes online, then we can focus in on what types of boundary adjustments would we consider. In the Columbia West, something very similar, 2019 and 2021 with our schools, we have to monitor town center development, student yields, that's coming up to the 10%, but we also, while we need to study that enrollment growth, we are considering studying the primary intermediate grade reconfiguration in Columbia West to better utilize the capital investments that are there. So for example, pairing two middle schools, two elementary schools, one would be, say, pre-K through second, the other be 3 through 5, studying that and seeing if we can get maybe a full feeder pattern out of it between two elementary schools so all the kids move through the system at the same time frame. This is the other portion of our capital improvement, our strategies, and includes proposed capital projects such as Dunlogan and Ellicott Mills middle schools, and also in the interim using relocatables to manage that growth. This figure is the planning needs for fiscal year 2020. The document includes, the document is 2.7 on page 16 of the feasibility study if you need to see it up close. This graphic shows how the long-range plan can evolve. The arrows show the changes from the 2017 feasibility study with the FY 18 and 19 shown on the chart. You can see the trend is fewer open dates of capital projects in the next few years. This feasibility study is proposing changes to the long-range capital planning. Those suggestions include elementary school number 43 with occupancy moving from school year 2023 to 2024. We continue to recommend that to plan for elementary school 43 in the southeast region, given the growth forecasted along the US 1 corridor, which includes Hanover Hills, but also including Fulton Elementary School within that study group. Elementary school number 44, occupancy moving from school year 2027 up to school year 2026, and actually changing the location of this elementary school to the northern region. Elementary school 45, occupancy from 2029 to 2030 in the Columbia location. The proposed capacities of ES 43 and 44 are reduced from 788 to 600, and the proposed capacity of elementary school 45 is 490. With all of these considerations, our conclusion has been to not initiate boundary adjustment process for the 2018-2019 school year. Continue to implement the Jump Start program, develop those options to expand the program, and look and monitor at the trailing siblings. Consider studying a grade reconfiguration in Columbia West region to better utilize the capital investments. Monitor the need for relocatable classroom placement. Consider elementary school 43 in the southeast region. Consider advancement of a northern elementary school to 2026, and consider a delay of the Columbia Elementary School for 2030. Yeah, it's a real long range. With that, we do request that the board proceed with the recommendations of the report.
You finish your report
Sure.
before the board. Just for my edification, with the adjustments to the relocatables, how many of our schools fall within the targeted range for utilization between the 90 and 110% for policy 6010? When
I would say the majority. There are several that actually are below target utilization with the incorporation of all the portables. So all of the schools are below 110% capacity utilization, and there are quite a few, I haven't counted up, that are actually below 90% capacity utilization with the portables on site that are using them.
Thank you very much. Ms. Delmont Small.
Excuse me.
Thank you. I have some initial questions, just so to make sure that I understood this correctly. On page 14, you mentioned table 2.7, which shows school capacity changes, and then you have table 2.8, on page 15 that says local capacity and state-rated capacity as of June 2018.
Yes.
Does Table 2.8 include the data from Table
Yes.
2.7? Thank
Yes.
you.
And just a side note, Table 2.8 is a new requirement under adequate public facilities.
I noticed.
Yes.
Okay, on page 19, we have that handy-dandy Plan Howard 2030 designated places map.
Yes.
May I kindly request if you could take this map and overlay all of our schools on it?
Yeah, I think we can do that.
I think that would be I know that would be helpful for me.
I think we can do that.
That would be lovely. And on page, also, would it be possible to provide the board an updated chart showing developments and the projected timeline? This was something I had asked for during that whole redistricting thing we went through.
You mean the
New developments.
new development
Correct.
projected with
Yes.
the one that was used during the, yeah.
Yeah, that would be fabulous. And my last question for right now is, do you have, we're talking a lot about the relocatables, and I'm going to make a jump here, is that when we're talking about putting relocatables, we're not moving them from somewhere else, we're most probably going to have to be buying more. So if we could have, and I don't know if you look at it this way, a 5-year projection, maybe 5 years is too long, maybe it's 2 or 3 is better, of the number of relocatables that we would need and the total cost required for doing that, I think that would be helpful to the board as well.
Sure.
Thank you.
Anybody else? No other questions? Ms. French?
Whether or not there has been a decision among staff, a recommendation, that we continue using relocatables as a strategy. We had a lengthy conversation regarding school security, and a lot of it's focused around relocatables. So I don't know. I used to be extremely in favor of them, but now, given the tenor of our community and the worries, should relocatables really be used as a future strategy for addressing overcapacity?
No.
Yeah, and I think that's what we need to discuss and hear a staff recommendation on from our school security team. Otherwise, this doesn't hold water.
Well, as we shared before, we're definitely over the summer doing an assessment of all of our buildings, including the portables. So we will be able to provide more information and get an idea of how they're being utilized countywide so that we'll know. But at this point, we will be using relocatables as a temporary measure for strategy for capacity. And that's really based on capital dollars.
True. So may I?
Please.
In the response from Ms. Valancourt, I echo that same response. I would like to see us begin a process where we begin to phase out relocatables. In an ideal world, I've already called for internal information to say what would be the cost to eliminate them in a short period of time. The cost is absolutely astronomical.
Right.
Because you're looking at a school system where we build a school, and by the time we open it, and before we open it, it's overcrowded. And we're confined by the state capacity issues, a variety of issues that we saw that emerged in the discussion with Talbot Springs. So the issues that have been discussed regarding security are ripe in my mind. But then short-term, how do we manage that? Because we're not going to have the influx of dollars. We're not going to be adding to the piece regarding the brick and mortar, and even if we did make some adjustments, that there would still be a need for them. So how do you balance all of that in terms of a long-term philosophy and a short-term? So there is a short-term strategy and a long-term strategy until we can get to opening these schools, which are projected. We finally now got that moving. It becomes part of a reality of discussion, but I just wanted to add that to the mix, and I know that doesn't provide a lot of definitive information. except for those are thoughts in the conversation.
Seems like part of the conversation needs to involve the county government. If we are going to, if the school system, and we as a citizen, not as a board member as of December, if they're going to continue to just wait to build until the state can participate in funding, we're never going to have what we need to satisfy the needs of the county's children. So the county itself and the community, the citizens have to have a real serious conversation with their elected county officials on what they're willing to invest in and contribute to. I mean, we've as a county decided we're not doing anything that the state doesn't participate in. And I mean, as a taxpayer, I understand the concept, but the state can't pay for everything that we need either when we need it at this point.
May I say that before I got on the board, in the 80s, the county council was extremely supportive of the need for more schools, and they forward funded various elementary schools, so that by the time I got on the board, the list of projects that would go to the IAC for funding included the schools that were already built and occupied, and we were asking for the state for reimbursement, and we received that gradually over a number of years. So I don't know what's different now regarding the laws or procedures. There's been at least 3 different heads of the IAC in the meantime, but a county council or a county government that is so supportive of growth should also be supportive of new buildings.
Please.
I think it also has to be brought up in the broader conversation about funding the overall school system. I believe that Ms. Delmont Small talked about where we are with our current budget. A lot of the work now has been stabilizing all aspects of this and having some form of a plan to move forward. But what kind of county do we live in when we want this gold star school system and we cannot survive on maintenance of effort? And having the infusion of 17 beyond that, when we talk about what it takes just to feed the beast per se, in terms of the proverbial conversation of that, it's beyond a maintenance of effort. And then the conversation further in these non-stressful times when we have to make decisions, what does that capital budget look like to include what Mrs. French just talked about, the local support for forward funding? And is there an appetite to do that? But the uniqueness of our county is, like any other in the state, as well as I'd venture to say in terms of the nation, in terms of the growth. This is an accelerated growth area that we're feeling every day that cannot keep with the same rules that are in place for funding. And that's a conversation that has to happen, and we need to lead that discussion because we're going to be back at the same place again next year. I mean, we're already thinking about the next budget cycle, and my optimism is not much greater. I will tell you that right now.
Ms. Coombs.
It still seems unconscionable to me that we're looking at Columbia East and Columbia West with, with space as far as the high school level, and leaving Howard, which is geographically so close to both of those, and we're not doing something. And how can we make kids stay in these buildings when there's actually space for them elsewhere? So I'm probably not in favor of the recommendation of not doing anything.
Well, somebody want to just jump in and say, I move that we initiate redistricting?
I move we initiate redistricting.
I second.
For the 2019-2020 school year.
I second.
Total? All levels? The whole county? That's too broad a motion.
All right, I move we initiate high school redistricting with
High school
With what intent?
with the intent of relieving Howard and utilizing capacity, but we would also have to deal with middle school feeds and elementary school feeds. So I don't want it to be too narrow.
Okay. Ms.
Does my seconder have another idea?
I am, I think we're on the same
Yeah.
page. I'm trying to figure out how we word this in a way not to be, I don't want people to think the whole county is going to shift, but
Well, we
we,
were just-
you don't, the
Yeah.
But we have to have the
challenge is
freedom.
We don't know what it means
Right.
until we get into the weeds.
Right, because we also want to have the freedom to be able to figure out high school 13,
Correct.
and it's polygons. But what about middle school feeds?
What about, say, all high school, and make necessary adjustments?
Well,
Is that a
wouldn't-
way to split
Wouldn't the
baby?
first step be to direct staff to
To
come
come up with a
back
plan?
with a proposal for a redistricting to take effect? Or do you want more direction?
No, so I'm going to go back again to the conversation. I recognize, already the expressed concern. That works its way to me on a regular basis. And not surprised, but understand the conversation that occurred earlier in this about maintaining objectivity. This is a recommendation based upon a variety of different factors that needs to be looked at in the broader context. This board also directed staff earlier to provide more opportunities to expand programmatic issues, open enrollment, explore all of those, but yet we haven't even started those, and I don't have, and you're talking about data-driven decisions, I don't have that hard data right now to report it, because we haven't even started that yet. So I can provide you several scenarios that will meet certain needs. I would like some level of directedness so that I'm not shooting in the dark based upon that. And again, going back to your conversation earlier about having some input up front to guide that recommendation. So I want to have the level of freedom to be able to, with objectivity, but now we've done that with one presentation based upon the data, and it's early, provide that direction in a more directed way, or make it a general, and I will respond in kind.
Dr. Altwerger?
Okay.
You let it.
I agree that we have to.
Mike.
It seems to me obvious we have to do something. I think it would be unconscionable to not do something to alleviate the overcrowding currently. And we have at least 7 schools at the elementary level alone that are going to be closed, according to the Apfo report, by 21-22. So are we going to do it again? And, why don't we try to deal with this sooner rather than later to be proactive and make sure that it doesn't get to that point? Now, earlier in the meeting tonight, we talked about, I had requested that we put on our quarterly agenda earlier in the agenda a report on programmatic incentives to address Columbia area schools. I don't know what that is. We don't know what that is. We haven't had the report. We don't know what you're thinking. Whether it be through mandatory redistricting or through targeted redistricting or through incentive programs, we need to do something, in my opinion. We cannot leave things as they are.
I agree with that. That's why I was trying to be somewhat general, because I agree.
I would want to broaden rather than narrow your.
To give him the freedom?
Yes, so what I would like is for you to provide us with, as you say, some options for how we may proceed that deals with this overcrowding, especially at Howard, as soon as possible, but for the following school year. It might be, as I said, I won't repeat myself, but
And with
there's
the
a variety of scenarios that we
Right.
could think through.
And with the thought
Special
of preparing
programs.
high school 13.
Yes, we can't wait until
then.
Then.
Right.
We just can't. It's not fair to the human beings in those buildings. The children who will have their entire careers done, high school careers done by then.
So Kathy, what do you want my motion to look like?
Well, we'll continue.
We
Let the rest of
provide
us
direction?
do it.
Okay.
Ms. Ellis has a comment.
Yes, I'm in total agreement with Dr. Altwerger. We have to do something. We've been talking about programmatic changes that might be incentives for students to move for capacity issues. We recognize that we have some schools that are under capacity that might be able to provide programming. I've worked where we have signature programs that have a number of students moving, taking transportation. Transportation is cheaper than buildings, and if that's what we need, I'd rather go that route. When we talk about redistricting, it's a mandated move. So I'd really like to see what kind of options we get prior to mandating that students from one school need to go to another school. And especially since we have other schools that will be, High School 13 will be coming up, and as we look at how many moves a student or students in a family would have to make in the next few years, I'm not for making a whole lot of moves for our children. So if there is, actually, the middle school where I work, it's part of what's called a choice program. So students and families can choose the specific programs that they're going to. And I think that we have a community that would appreciate having options for their students. We don't have any kind of magnets. I mean, you start talking about the arts. We don't have any schools that have programs that focus on things like the arts. And one of the things I was talking with Ms. Delmont Smalls in terms of the cost of some of these programs, that they have. And there may not be a lot of cost to the programs if you're just talking about instruction or whatever. So I think that we have, I think we are all concerned about the capacity, the undercapacity schools, the overcapacity schools. I do have a lot of concerns about mandating a child to move from their school. If there are other options, I'd like to see those first.
Ms. Delmont Small.
I agree with my colleague. In a perfect world, we would have non-mandated movement of students based on having magnet and so on and so forth, which will be a cultural shift for this county. That was verboten for a very long time. Every school had to be the same. But the price is a huge issue, and I would implore you that the options you bring to us should each have a price tag, because we as a board need to be able to help. We need to work with the community and hear from the community as to what the priorities are. Because recall, one of the things that many people still would like to see would be later start times. Well, it had a $6 million per year price tag. Okay, well, where does that sit within this? Because that's part of the challenge, is that because of our fiscal situation, not only could possibly things have to be reshifted when it just comes to where students go to school. Also, again, how are we delivering education in Howard County? So there has to be that careful balance, because I wish we could do everything. We can't, and we have to be very careful with what we do. And we have Jumpstart. I'm hoping that we're going to get some data with that and be able to see how this works and how it doesn't. But I think we're very lucky because we have Montgomery County, we have Fairfax County. There are other jurisdictions, both within Maryland and outside of Maryland, that have had different delivery systems. So we do not have to recreate the wheel. But again, please provide us with a anticipated cost for all of these so that we can use that in part of our decision-making process.
Dr. Martirano.
So, music to my ears in many ways. because if you remember, initially, when I assumed the role, we did introduce a long-term CIP that still has the conversation starters about immersion programs. 3 were in there just to start priming the pump for a school system where the culture is not to engage in these kind of discussions, as was just stated. And I referenced throughout the entire redistricting process about the so-called one-trick pony of just addressing student movement. So the opportunities are there. There are opportunities to accelerate that are there, but I just want to get some clarification. We're talking about upcoming school year?
No.
I heard something about next school year. Well, let's understand that that's not,
19.
I'm
No,
thinking,
we're
right,
talking
yeah, so let's make sure we're on the
19.
same
process
wavelength.
next year for the following.
We've got certain
Very
things in place.
important to the public. Yet nothing else is going on beyond what we decided in
We're chomping at the bit to
November.
introduce those kind of things. And again, tonight is a conversation starter about a fact-based feasibility study with that as the starting point, and the time of which we have to devote to that. So the guidance being provided tonight is more instructive, but also in alignment to things that we've already discussed in last year's. And then also looking at Mr. Hcpss, who's had conversations during the redistricting process to look at some of the existing things, such as open enrollment, and expanding that to other schools, getting the data and expanding that to other high schools. What does that look like long-term? And I'll be more than happy to provide that for you.
Okay. So just my time here. Even if you have open enrollment, even if you have magnet schools, whatever, you still have attendance areas that are assigned to each school. So what we talked about in the fall, and what I would like us to figure out a way to word correctly, we know we're going to have a new high school, we know where it's going to be now, we should be drafting the attendance areas that incorporate where that high school is going to be. And then, because that's something we could get started on. And if we get started on that now, as these other pieces are being developed, then whatever, if we end up having to do mandatory moves, they can all be related to the final plan that would be in effect in 2023. Because, you know, we can't, even if we do magnets and what have you, you still can't just sort of go off half-cocked on, well, we're going to move somebody from over here to over there, and, you know, there needs to be some method to the madness. So my preference would be that we instruct us all to begin the process to develop what the attendance areas for the new high school would be, and then we can work on whatever kind of interim moves or programmatic offerings we can do, because this work is going to have to be done. And we can get to September or October and say, well, we're not going to be making any of these moves for school year 1920, but we still have to do the work, and kids are still going to go to school in the 19 and 20. And if we, for some reason, can't develop plans that can be put into place, then shame on us. There has to be, you know, this always was that the school year 18-19, whatever relief we could get from Jump Start and the movements of the portables that could make it reasonably palatable to continue to exist for school year 18-19, all go out the window with 19-20. I mean, we always said that there were going to have to be moves made. And there are some moves that could start being made for the 19-20 school year that would provide relief. But until we sketch out the new attendance areas, I mean, I think that's a reasonable starting point. That's what I think. Ms. Delmont Small.
So if I heard my colleague correctly, you're saying that we would move forward to look at things, and that there possibly could be movement for the 1920 school year so that we could alleviate Howard High School. And
Yeah.
whoever else we need to at that point in time.
And the reason that we would need to start with the direction tonight, if there is any hope of having the information available in order to make the decisions up to the date you're backed against the wall in mid-December, and November, I'm sorry. Yeah. Turns out months are like numbers for me. They're not working for me either. But in any event, it has to get started. You have to start, the trip of a bazillion miles starts with one step. And the other stuff has to start being worked on. And I know that the whole staff has been inundated with a lot of other stuff. We now have a budget in place for next year. We now have we're not going to have to raise class sizes. We have some pieces that have been falling into place.
Exactly.
It's time to start moving forward. And as far as a motion, I think that making the direction that we begin the process of developing attendance areas for the high schools, including the high school 13, so that we can use that as our basis for making moves, or not, but we're not there yet. That's what you all need to get started on.
Right.
If that sounds reasonable to any of my colleagues.
How would you?
Ms. Delmont-Small, you
I was just going to reiterate that in addition to our little price, not little, I wish it was little, price tag to this, is also that we make sure that we utilize, data and measures so that we can figure out, and also because we have, Jumpstart is going to be starting, how are we going to be evaluating that so that we can then take that data moving forward
Exactly.
and look and see how, again, I want us to be able to have the best informed decisions possible. We're not,
But I may not have that data because it hasn't even started yet. So we'll continue to get it,
that's
but we're
true.
going to kind of be moving fast to get some.
right, but by the beginning of next year, we'll know how many kids are in, you know what I'm saying, that sort of thing.
how many actually showed up. 'Cause
Right, exactly. Showing up is one
For purposes of redistricting conversations, all we need to know is how many kids actually showed up.
Exactly, and then trailing
Whether or not
SIDs
it-
and other
whether or not
things
it
such as
matches
that.
up to what,
Yeah, right.
yeah.
Is there
All right, do we
should we
wanna
just
call the
withdraw the
question?
motion and do a new one, or try to amend it to? Okay, you guys ready? Do you mind
Yeah,
withdrawing?
I recall.
Do you
That's
mind
fine.
withdrawing?
Okay. I move the board direct the superintendent to provide options in order to relieve overcrowding specifically at the high school level and considering high school 13.
What about the attendance area?
I think that's, and
Does that?
To provide options.
It works in her motion.
we've already verbally said, start drawing attendance areas for the high schools, that includes 13.
I second.
Yep, options.
Yeah, all of it.
I second.
Okay, Mavis seconded.
So we have a motion by Ms. Coombs and a second by Ms. Ellis. Are you ready to vote on that? Yeah,
Would you please read it for me?
sure. Move the board direct the superintendent to provide options in order to relieve overcrowding specifically at the high school level. And what else did you say?
Including,
And attendance areas for high school 13.
Oh, and- yeah.
Could you just add a qualifier at the beginning, either comprehensive or inclusive options?
Options.
You have options, but comprehensive options or inclusive options. I want something.
What's the difference?
Well,
He
it's-
means
it's just a more clarity.
programmatic.
Yeah. I mean, I want
And
it's more than just
mandatory.
attendance. I wanted to we're exploring everything.
Right.
It's
But
just
getting started
semantics.
with high school attendance areas that incorporate high school 13s.
But that may be difficult with doing attendance areas for the new high school with Hammond also coming on, and it will change. So even if we do that now, it could potentially change.
Understood, but then
Okay.
it should be considered in the going
I just-
forward.
I
of
just
the
wanted to
next,
make that
like,
point before.
Right, every year, it should be considered.
There has to be a starting point.
Right.
One issue I have with that, just.
Yes.
Can we finish with the motion first? What word do you want? Comprehensive?
Redundant, but it's just a more directive as far as saying
Comprehensive
exploring
options.
everything.
Okay.
Now, does the motion say specifically or
Okay, here's
high
the-
school? Because I see 7 or 8 elementary schools in the Columbia area that need attention.
Okay, let me read it again. Move the board direct the superintendent to provide comprehensive options in order to relieve overcrowding, specifically at the high school level, and attendance areas for high school number 13.
Does that eliminate elementary and middle?
No.
No.
We're not even there yet.
No, but it shows our priority at this point.
Right.
It's, can we just?
I want him
as
to
a-
start, I want him to start with high
Yes.
school
And with the understanding that once we get that, then there will be other changes that will be necessitated by.
Right. So rather than starting from an elementary school level, starting from a high school level perspective. Does that make sense, Renee?
It makes sense, but I just want to remind you that we are about 6 months behind on redistricting. We typically would have started running the WIFR system in January and already had some recommendations
Yeah,
laid out
we're
by
aware.
March. But we're in the middle of new software, and that's what we discussed at the end of the last redistricting. So we want you to know
We're in between.
We're in between, and it's not yet ready now, but it will be. So I just wanted to put that out there.
The bottom line, I think, for, if, I don't want to speak for everybody, but we need to get started. If we're 6 months behind, well, then we're 6 months behind getting started. There needs to be a plan for the kids who are going to start school in September, whatever.
19.
Of 19.
That's fine, that's fine.
Okay.
And
I just
that,
want to make sure
you
that.
know,
We
I didn't want-
know that there's a
okay.
challenge, right? But
It's not in our
Yeah.
best interest to have any further discussion on our end.
Yeah.
Give us the direction, and I'll take that.
And then, and see where we end up.
Right.
Okay, are you ready to vote?
May I add one
As
thing,
long as
though?
it doesn't preclude elementary.
It
This,
won't.
No, it
this does
doesn't.
not mean that they have to report to us before the board changes. This is giving them direction to recommend to a board, not this specific board.
minute, that's
So if
That's
they-
not my intention.
No, that's not
My
mine.
intention is that
Mine.
we make decisions this fall, like we did last
Right,
fall, that will
right.
take effect for school year 19.
That have to be done by mid-November.
And if it's not, if it's not comprehensive redistricting,
targeted.
if it's developing attendance areas that will eventually get into place, but that would be a starting spot for making interim moves, or, or even for programmatic issues, you'd say, people in these polygons or in this attendance area can choose, otherwise we're going to be busing people in a, 24/7 pattern. You need to isolate where your programmatic attendance area options are. You have to have, if you just think about down the line what decisions you make, even if you're going to have open enrollment, you're not going to provide open enrollment and transportation to anybody who wants to go to Marriott's Ridge from anywhere in the county, because it would be virtually
Well, that's why I
impossible to.
said targeted.
Exactly, and that's why you need
Targeted.
attendance areas
Open
developed
enrollment.
so that you can target.
Right, exactly.
Otherwise, you're
let's
just.
see what they come back with.
Right.
All right, I call the question.
You ready to vote?
Oh, Mr. Hajibu has a question.
Call the question.
He only asks like one
I
question a
know.
month. Give the man a break.
I'm trying to understand what's practical and logical relative to your ideas, specificity, timetable, because folks at this dais are going to go on vacation soon, and we have new software, and I feel like in the absence of, we'll get a board report in a week, or we'll get a board report on this date certain, we're just kicking the can tonight. I don't feel like for me personally, I do not want to go through what we went through last summer and last fall, but I don't want those kids at Howard High School to
Exactly.
be at that capacity next fall. And so I don't know if it's physically possible for us to accelerate this idea generation, but this coming year's 8th graders will be 9th graders in the fall of 19. Specifically, now I'm giving you a specific, how much would it cost to do mandatory redistricting of incoming 9th graders for next fall for these polygons? This is a black and white
That would be one of his
specific
options.
ask.
Yeah, that could be an option.
That would be something he
I'm
could,
just saying, if we give vague generalities and some of our friends are going on vacation this weekend for 2 weeks or whatever, when will this board practically consider those things? When will this board have time to vet these things? When will an AAC or the proposals, when will they all come? I just feel like we want ideas doesn't help unless we have specificity.
maybe you can respond to that?
My response is that, excuse me. Okay. My response is very clear. I'm waiting for the reaction from the board tonight. I need more time to answer those questions, and I can't provide that for you tonight. That's the only thing I can say.
And I'm not expecting, a black and white proposal tonight. I am challenging everyone at this table to be realistic, and in the absence of specificity quickly, ain't nothing going to get done. And I'm afraid that we will kick the can. So for example, another idea is we can do open enrollment for kids at Howard and Longreach and Centennial for this fall. People don't like it, they don't think it's equitable, but if we get 20 parents from Howard who are willing to drive their kids to Glen Elg or wherever it might be, that will free up 20 seats for this fall. And so, I don't know if that's a good idea, bad idea,
Certain
but
kids could do that.
it just seems like we need to drive, and it's June 8th, and we don't have an AAC, we don't have a WIFR or the new thing working. I'm not sure what we all expect to come out of these options. If, let's say the options come in 2 weeks. Okay, what are we going to do about that? It just feels weird to me, the vagueness and the lack of intentional specifics tonight.
Well, we can't do anything for this fall. We've already got staffing, transportation, all of that. So I don't think that we could do anything for the fall.
I simply
On open enrollment.
I simply said, if 20 moms and dads from Howard High School want to take their kids to Glen Elg or Marriott Ridge, ain't nothing that's going to change that, because 20 kids from Howard might unenroll this summer. So the staffing ain't changing, the transportation ain't changing, and, I mean, I'm just talking out loud. I'm encouraging this group to have specificity of ideas that the superintendent and the OSP people can take, that we are being intentional. So open enrollment's one. Rising eighth graders that are mandatory redistricting for the fall of 19 is another. What else can we come up with tonight to give these folks something specific to consider? That's just what's in my head.
Ms. Ellis is lit up, and then Dr. Ower.
The first thing I agree with you on is not doing what we did last year. That's something that I'm not looking forward to going through again soon. But I think that the stand that we're taking today in terms of giving direction to the superintendent and staff cannot come back in just a week or two. I think it's something that we need to get back before the end of the summer so that we can have a focus for 19. You must remember, when we started redistricting last year, we had the AAC recommendations. Then there were changes that happened. Then the superintendent did his recommendation. We didn't get that till maybe October. And along the way, there were all of these things, the money for high school 13, and there were all of those different places we were looking at for the next elementary school. It was really crazy. So if we can just deal with some data on the specific things that we've thrown out here, I think that we can make a decision allowing families and communities to feel secure without feeling sort of dumped on. That's what I'm looking at.
I agree with you, Ms. Ellis, and I agree it'll take time. I'm simply wanting folks in our community to have a sense of reality. I would like, speaking as one, I would like intentional overcrowding relief for those schools in the fall of 19. That's what I would like. How is that going to happen if we don't get a report till the end of the summer? I'm just talking out
For
loud.
19?
For 19.
Yeah.
I think
Why
that
wouldn't we?
getting what I'm saying is
Because the decision needs to be made in mid-November.
Did
Right,
you
but
mean
we-
18 or 19?
19.
He meant 19.
Okay.
But we didn't even have a concept of jumpstart
Right.
when we started the redistricting process. We didn't get that until when? October?
But what we did have was months of whiffing, and we've had months of AAC, and we had options, and Jumpstart happened, to coincide with the accelerated funding of High School 13. It was, Jumpstart in and of itself wasn't brought up, but the turmoil of the summer happened to coincide with the superintendent's recommendation and the acceleration of the funding. So it was only on that basis that I believe last fall that we should not do comprehensive redistricting. And if high school 13 had not been accelerated, or we didn't have optimism, we had optimism last fall for Jumpstart. Right, it's our first year, and we didn't hit as big of a number as we wanted to. Okay, so the byproduct of that announcement of Jumpstart on October 3rd of 2017 came from months and months of work. And so if we get a proposal from the superintendent end of August, 1st of September, I'm just afraid we're going to run out of time before November, whatever the deadline is in November.
Are you,
I'm okay.
Dr. Altwerger? Okay. Ms. Delmont Small?
I agree with my colleague. I think the more you, I mean, I know this is a big ask, but this outside-the-box thinking, we have to do it. It has to be on the paper so that we can say yes, no, or maybe so. And remember, this is what what we are moving into is a continuation of what we had been doing. So there is a little bit of a different flavor to it. So the process will move a little bit differently. But everyone knew that this was clearly a possibility, and that we're just here now. Thank you.
I'd like to just reiterate what Ms. Ellis said. Last year, I mean, the attendance areas were drawn before there were computers. So the fact that we don't have all of our new, whiz-bang gadgets up and ready to go does not have to preclude us from being able to do this. And we didn't have all of the other work, not that it was insignificant, that happened before October. Well, we still managed to get boundary lines decided in time for the vote. So we just need to get a start. And you have now the information you need to get a start, right? Mm-hmm. So we can call the question.
Okay, we have a motion by
Ms. Coombs?
Ms. Coombs and a second by Ms. Ellis. Mrs. French?
Yes.
Ms. Delmont Small?
Yes.
Ms. Ellis?
Yes.
Ms. Valencourt?
Yes.
Dr. Altwerger?
Yes.
Ms. Coombs?
Yes.
Mr. Hcpss?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
All right, thank you, everyone. And for our audience, thank you for being patient and waiting. And sorry, it's not a more clear-cut message to take away, but we are going to do something. We just don't know what it's going to look like yet. So good night, everyone. We are adjourned.
Good night. Dr. Red, absolutely.